Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty unique story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. Get cozy and watch till the end, guys.
In the grim darkness of the far future, where humanity clings to survival across a million worlds, there exists a force so rare, so exceptional, that their very presence on a battlefield can turn the tide of wars. They are not the countless masses of the Astra Militarum, nor even the legendary Space Marines who inspire terror in the Emperor's enemies. They are something more, something that transcends even the transhuman warriors of the Adeptus Astartes. They are the Adeptus Custodes, the 10,000, the Golden Legion. They are the Emperor's own companions, the guardians of the Master of Mankind, and they stand as living proof that humanity can aspire to heights of perfection that border on the divine. To understand the strength of the Custodians is to peer into the very heart of what the Emperor envisioned for humanity's future. These warriors are not merely soldiers enhanced beyond human capability. They are masterworks of genetic artistry, each one a unique creation that represents thousands of hours of painstaking work, arcane science lost to all but the most secretive chambers of terror, and the direct application of the Emperor's own genius. Where Space Marines are mass-produced exemplars of humanity's warrior spirit, Custodians are individually crafted paragons, each one a testament to what a single human being could become if the full weight of the Imperium's resources and the Emperor's knowledge were devoted to their creation. Their history stretches back beyond the Imperium itself, to the dark days of the Unification Wars, when terror was not yet united under one banner. In those ancient times, when the Emperor walked among his creations, not as a god entombed upon a golden throne, but as a warlord of unmatched power, the first Custodians were already at his side. They predated the Thunder Warriors, those savage gene-enhanced soldiers who conquered terror. They were there before the Primarchs were even a dream in the Emperor's mind, before the space Marine legions marched across the stars. The Custodians have stood vigil over the Master of Mankind for so long that their origins are shrouded in mystery even to themselves, lost in the mists of time that separate the present darkness from humanity's golden age. The world knows them by their golden armor, that lustrous auramite plate that catches the light like captured sunlight, that stands as a beacon of hope in the darkest battles. They are known by their weapons, those guardian spears that serve as both deadly power weapons and precision firearms, wielded with a grace and skill that makes even veteran Space Marines appear clumsy by comparison. They are recognized by their silence, their watchful presence in the shadows of the Imperial Palace, their unwavering dedication to a single purpose that has defined their existence for 10 millennia and more. But these surface impressions barely scratch the surface of what the Custodians truly are. To be a Custodian is to be enhanced. Beyond the comprehension of baseline humanity, it is to possess strength that can break ceramite and rend plasteel as if it were parchment. It is to move with a speed that makes the eyes struggle to follow, to react with reflexes honed by centuries of constant training and actual combat against the worst horrors the galaxy can produce. It is to think with a clarity and depth that encompasses not just the immediate tactical situation, but also the strategic implications, the political ramifications, and the philosophical underpinnings of every decision. A Custodian is not simply a warrior. They are a scholar, a diplomat, an artist, a philosopher, and a killer of such supreme excellence that they operate on a level most beings cannot even conceive of, let alone achieve. The question that echoes through the halls of Imperial Command, whispered in the war rooms of Space Marine fortresses, and debated in the chambers of the Inquisition is this: just how strong are the Custodians? The answer is not simple, for their strength cannot be measured merely in how much they can lift or how fast they can run. Their power is not just physical, though in that arena they stand supreme among humanity's warriors. Their might encompasses the mental, the spiritual, and the tactical. It is reflected in every aspect of their being, from the way they are created to the manner in which they wage war. In the galaxy of the 41st millennium, where threats emerge from the void between stars, where demons crawl through tears in reality, where Xeno's empires seek to extinguish humanity's light, the Custodians represent the Emperor's most perfect answer to the question of how humanity can survive. They are not numerous enough to conquer the galaxy, numbered as they are at approximately 10,000 warriors. They are not spread across the Imperium like the Space Marines, establishing domains and recruiting new brothers to replenish their losses. They are focused, concentrated, a golden spear kept at the heart of the Imperium, ready to strike at the most critical threats. Understanding their strength requires us to examine every facet of what makes a Custodian what they are. We must delve into the mysterious process that transforms an infant into a golden warrior. We must explore the physical capabilities that allow them to stand alone against entire armies. We must witness their combat prowess, see how centuries of training and actual warfare have honed their skills to supernatural sharpness. We must understand their equipment, the weapons and armor that are worth planetary ransoms, crafted with such care and expertise that each piece is a relic in its own right. We must examine their minds, those intellects enhanced far beyond even the already formidable cognition of Space Marines. And we must look at their history, at the battles they have fought, and the victories they have won against odds that would have seen entire Space Marine chapters destroyed. The Qiki. Custodians are more than soldiers. They are symbols, living representations of what the Emperor intended for humanity. In a galaxy where hope is a commodity more rare than adamantium, where despair is a constant companion to those who understand the true depths of the threats facing mankind, the Custodians stand as proof that humanity can create warriors capable of facing down any horror. They are the golden thread that connects the ancient days of the Great Crusade to the dark present of the 41st millennium. They are the keepers of secrets, the bearers of the Emperor's will, the last line of defense between the Golden Throne and the countless enemies who would see it destroyed. Their strength is legendary, spoken of in awed whispers by those few who have seen them in action and survived. Tales are told of single Custodians holding defensive positions against entire hordes, of golden warriors cutting through enemy champions as if they were moving through fields of wheat. There are accounts of Custodians performing feats of martial prowess that would be dismissed as impossible exaggeration if they were not witnessed by multiple sources and recorded in the archives of the Imperium. Their reputation is such that when Custodians march to war, enemies who would face down Space Marines without hesitation feel the first cold touch of genuine fear. But reputation, no matter how well earned, is not the same as understanding. To truly comprehend the strength of the Custodians, we must go deeper. We must examine the science and art that creates them, the training and experience that shapes them, the equipment and tactics that multiply their effectiveness. We must look at specific examples, at named Custodians whose deeds have been recorded for posterity, at battles where their intervention meant the difference between victory and catastrophic defeat. We must compare them to the Space Marines, those other transhuman warriors with whom they share some surface similarities, but differ in fundamental ways. And we must acknowledge their limitations, for even the Custodians, supreme as they are, cannot be everywhere, cannot fight every battle, cannot save every world. The story of the Custodians is one that spans millennia. It is a tale of unwavering duty maintained across timescales that would break lesser beings. It is an account of battles fought in the shadows and in the light, of enemies defeated and threats neutralized before they could grow into existential dangers. It is a chronicle of sacrifice, for though Custodians are mighty beyond measure, they are not invincible, and the rolls of honor bear the names of those who have fallen in service to the Emperor and the Imperium. It is a narrative of hope, for as long as the Golden Legion stands guard, there remains a force capable of facing the worst the galaxy can offer and emerging victorious. As we embark on this exploration of Custodians' strength, we will journey from the secret laboratories where infants are transformed into posthuman warriors, to the training halls where they master weapons and arts that span the full spectrum of human knowledge, to battlefields across the galaxy where they have demonstrated time and again why they are considered the pinnacle of what humanity can achieve. We will meet legendary figures, warriors, whose names echo through history as exemplars even among the 10,000. We will witness battles that tested the Custodians to their absolute limits and see how they responded when facing impossible odds. The Golden Warriors of the Adeptus Custodes are not gods, though some might mistake them for such. They are not invincible, though they are supremely difficult to kill. They are not infinite in number, though each one is worth far more than his weight in any material wealth. What they are, ultimately, is the answer to a question the Emperor posed at the very beginning of his great work. What could a human being become if nothing was held back? If every resource, every scrap of knowledge, every technique and technology available was devoted to perfecting a single individual? The Custodians are that answer, made manifest in gold and auramite, in flesh and blood, enhanced beyond normal measure, in minds honed to perfection through countless years of learning and experience. Their strength is real, measurable, and devastating. Let us now examine exactly how strong the Custodians truly are, and in doing so, perhaps gain a glimpse of what humanity might one day become if it survives the endless night that threatens to consume it. The process by which a Custodian is created remains one of the most closely guarded secrets in the entire Imperium. Even the Mechanicum, with their vast stores of forbidden knowledge and their obsessive cataloguing of every technological wonder, know only fragments of the techniques involved. The Emperor himself designed the process, drawing upon genetic lore that dated back to the Dark Age of technology and perhaps even beyond, into periods of human history so ancient that they exist now only as myth and legend. What is known is that the creation of a Custodian is fundamentally different from the augmentation process that produces a space marine, and those differences account for much of the gulf in capabilities between these two types of transhuman warriors. Where a space marine is created through the surgical implantation of gene seed-derived organs into an adolescent human subject, a Custodian is built from the cellular level up, their entire genetic structure rewritten according to patterns that exist nowhere else in the Imperium. The process begins in infancy, selecting candidates from among the noble houses of Terra, or discovering them through means known only to the Custodians themselves. These children, no more than babies when they are taken, show potential that the Custodians can recognize but which remains mysterious to outsiders. They are brought to the secret chambers deep within the Imperial Palace, to laboratories where the arts of genetic manipulation have been perfected over thousands of years of practice and accumulated knowledge. What happens next is not a series of surgical procedures, though surgery plays its part. It is not the introduction of foreign organs that will grant new capabilities, though the Custodian physiology certainly includes structures not found in baseline humans. Instead, it is a complete genetic rewrite, an alchemical transformation that operates at the most fundamental level of human biology. Every cell in the infant's body is transformed, altered according to specifications laid down by the Emperor's own hand. This is not mass production. This is art of the highest order, craftwork that requires years of constant attention and adjustment. The transformation takes decades. Unlike Space Marines, who can be created relatively quickly once a suitable candidate is identified, Custodians require a span of time measured in tens of years to reach their full potential. During this period, teams of geneticists work constantly, monitoring every aspect of the candidate's development, making minute adjustments to ensure that the transformation proceeds according to plan. The process is partly standardized, following protocols established during the earliest days of the Custodian's creation. but it is also partly individualized. Each candidate receives modifications tailored specifically to their unique genetic makeup and their particular potential. This individualization is crucial to understanding what makes Custodians different from Space Marines. A Space Marine receives the gene seed of his Primarch, those biological implants that carry the genetic legacy of one of the Emperor's gene sons. All Space Marines of a given chapter share the same basic augmentations, the same enhancements granted by their Primarch's gene seed. This creates a certain uniformity, a baseline capability that all brothers of a chapter possess. Custodians, by contrast, do not share gene seed. Each one is unique, their genetic enhancements tailored to bring out the maximum potential hidden within their original biology. Two Custodians, standing side by side, might have been enhanced in slightly different ways, their strengths distributed differently, their capabilities manifesting in unique patterns. The geneticists who perform this work are themselves part of ancient lineages that have served the Custodians since before the Imperium was founded. These families, bound by oaths of secrecy that have held for 10,000 years, possess knowledge that even the Fabricator General of Mars does not have access to. They work in laboratories that contain technology from the dark age of technology, devices whose full capabilities are understood by perhaps a handful of individuals in the entire galaxy. They employ techniques that border on the mystical, genetic manipulations that seem to violate what the Mechanicum understands about the limits of human biology. The result of all this effort, all these resources, all this time and expertise is a being who transcends normal human limits in every measurable way. A Custodian, once the transformation is complete, stands taller than a baseline human by more than a full head's height, their frame broad and powerful in ways that make even the largest unaugmented humans appear frail by comparison. But size alone does not capture the transformation that has occurred. Every system in a Custodian's body has been optimized, enhanced, rebuilt to operate at levels of efficiency that approach theoretical perfection. Their musculature is denser than normal human tissue, packed with fibers that can generate force far exceeding what their size alone would suggest. Their skeletal structure has been reinforced at the molecular level, bones that could shatter steel without breaking themselves. Their cardiovascular system pumps blood enriched with oxygen-carrying cells far more efficient than normal hemoglobin, feeding tissues that can operate for extended periods without rest or sustenance. Their nervous system conducts signals at speeds that grant reaction times measured in tiny fractions of seconds, allowing them to respond to threats with a swiftness that appears almost precognitive to outside observers. But the transformation goes beyond the physical. A Custodian's brain undergoes enhancement that elevates their cognitive capabilities far above normal human intelligence and even beyond the already formidable mental abilities of Space Marines. Their memory becomes nearly perfect, able to recall with precision details from decades past. Their analytical capabilities allow them to process tactical situations with a speed and accuracy that borders on supernatural. They can master disciplines that would take baseline humans entire lifetimes to learn, and they can do so while simultaneously training in combat techniques that require absolute physical perfection to execute. This cognitive enhancement is paired with psychological conditioning that instills absolute loyalty to the Emperor and an understanding of duty that transcends normal human concepts of service. A Custodian is not merely programmed to obey. They are educated to understand why their service matters, trained to think independently within the framework of their duty. They serve not because they cannot do otherwise, but because they have chosen to dedicate their existence to the protection of the Emperor and the Imperium he built. This makes them not just bodyguards, but also counselors, advisors who can offer perspective drawn from centuries of experience and enhanced cognitive abilities. The time investment required to create a Custodian, combined with the individual attention each candidate receives, means that they cannot be mass-produced the way Space Marines can. A chapter of Space Marines can recruit new brothers relatively quickly, replacing losses through a process that, while dangerous and requiring resources, can be completed within years. The Custodians, numbered at approximately 10,000, can only replace losses through that same painstaking process that created them in the first place. Each Custodian who falls in battle represents decades of effort lost, a unique work of genetic art destroyed. This rarity makes every Custodian precious beyond measure, a resource that cannot be squandered on battles that lesser warriors could handle. The process also imbues Custodians with something that Space Marines lack: a spark of the Emperor's own presence. This is not simply propaganda or spiritual rhetoric. Custodians carry within them something of the Emperor's essence, a touch of his power that manifests as a subtle but real resistance to the corrupting influence of chaos. This resistance is not absolute invulnerability to demonic power, but it is significant. Where Space Marines require constant vigilance and faith to resist corruption, Custodians possess an innate resistance that makes them far less vulnerable to the whispers of the warp and the blandishments of chaos. This resistance stems from the fundamental nature of their creation. The Emperor did not simply enhance human genetics when he created the template for Custodians. He infused something of himself into the process, a fraction of his own power woven into the genetic patterns that would be replicated in each of his golden warriors. This touch of the divine, for lack of a better term, grants Custodians their supernatural resilience against psychic attacks and demonic influence. It is why they can stand before greater demons without flinching, why they can fight through psychic assaults that would reduce baseline humans to gibbering wrecks. The aegis of the Emperor is not merely a game mechanic or a poetic description. It is a real phenomenon, a measurable effect that has saved Custodian lives in countless battles against the forces of the warp. The creation process produces warriors who are, in every measurable sense, superior to Space Marines, despite the Astartes themselves being transhuman warriors, far beyond normal human capability. A Custodian stands taller than a Space Marine, is stronger, faster, tougher, smarter, and more skilled. This is not to diminish the capabilities of the Space Marines, who are themselves among the greatest warriors humanity has ever produced. It is simply to acknowledge that Custodians represent a different level of enhancement entirely, the difference between a mass-produced vehicle and a handcrafted masterpiece that has consumed vastly more resources and time. The question of whether new Custodians can still be created in the 41st millennium, with the Emperor entombed upon the Golden Throne, is one that has implications for the future of the Adeptus Custodes. The answer appears to be yes, though at a reduced rate compared to the days when the Emperor could, personally, oversee the process. The ancient geneticist families still possess the knowledge and the equipment necessary to transform infants into golden warriors. The Custodians themselves maintain the laboratories and preserve the techniques. Noble families of Terra still consider it a great honor to offer up their infant children for consideration as Custodian candidates. The process continues, slowly replacing losses and maintaining the strength of the 10,000, though each loss still represents a tragedy given the time and resources invested in every Custodian's creation. In comparison to the relatively straightforward, if still dangerous and complex, process of creating a Space Marine, the creation of a Custodian is like comparing the mass production of weapons to the work of a master artisan crafting a single blade over years of effort. Both produce effective warriors. Both create beings far beyond baseline human capability, but the Custodian represents the absolute pinnacle of what can be achieved when no expense is spared, when time is not a limiting factor, when the full weight of genetic knowledge accumulated over millennia is brought to bear on transforming a single individual into the absolute best warrior possible. This difference in creation philosophy permeates every aspect of how Custodians and Space Marines approach warfare, how they think about their role in the Imperium, and how they relate to the baseline humans they are sworn to protect. A space marine is bred for war, enhanced to fight as part of a brotherhood, trained to see themselves as part of a larger whole. A custodian is crafted to be an individual exemplar, a complete warrior capable of operating alone if necessary, educated to think for themselves within the bounds of their loyalty. Both serve the Emperor, but they do so in fundamentally different ways, reflecting the different purposes for which they were created. The physical capabilities of a custodian border on the incredible, even in a galaxy where superhuman feats are commonplace among various warrior elites. To witness a custodian in battle is to see the limits of human potential pushed to extremes that defy easy comprehension. They move with a grace and speed that seems impossible for beings of their size, fight with a precision and power that can overwhelm enemies who have faced down space marines without fear, and endure punishment that would kill lesser warriors multiple times over. Understanding their physical prowess requires examining the various aspects of their enhanced biology and how these enhancements manifest in actual combat situations. In terms of raw strength, a custodian operates on a level significantly above that of a space marine. While exact measurements are difficult to obtain and vary between individuals given the personalized nature of custodian enhancement, accounts from actual battles and training exercises provide clear evidence of their superior might. Custodians have been recorded casually breaking the grips of ogrins, those massive abhuman creatures whose strength far exceeds that of baseline humans. They can crush ceramite armor with their hands, rend plasteel with their bare strength, and wield weapons that would require powered assistance for others to even lift. One particularly illuminating account comes from the records of Amon Tauromachian, a custodian who found himself engaged in combat against 3 Genostock ogres, creatures bred specifically for enhanced strength and aggression. The fight took place while Amon was unarmored, stripped of the augmentation that his auramite plate would have provided. Despite this disadvantage, he dispatched his opponents with brutal efficiency. When one ogrin attempted to strike him with a punch dagger, Amon broke the creature's arm with enough force to shatter the bone despite the ogrin's enhanced musculature, then used the creature's own weapon to drive through its skull. When another ogrin grabbed him from behind in a bear hug that would have crushed a normal human's ribcage, Amon simply tensed his muscles and shrugged off the grip, then punched his hand through the ogrin's chest and ripped out its heart. This account is valuable not just for demonstrating raw strength, but also for showing what a custodian can accomplish without armor enhancement. The auramite plate that custodians wear into battle provides additional strength augmentation, magnifying their already formidable might to even greater heights. When fully armored, a custodian's strength reaches levels that allow them to perform feats that would challenge even the most powerful war machines. They can flip vehicles, smash through reinforced bunkers, and engage in melee combat with enemy walkers and light tanks with a reasonable expectation of victory. Comparisons to Space Marines in terms of strength consistently show custodians at a significant advantage. While a Space Marine in power armor can certainly perform impressive feats of strength, accounts of direct physical contests between custodians and Astartes invariably show the custodian overwhelming the Space Marine through sheer physical superiority. This is not a matter of slight advantage. When custodians and Space Marines have engaged in sparring or, in rarer and more tragic cases, actual combat, the custodians have been able to physically overpower their opponents, sending them flying with strikes that the Space Marines struggle to absorb even through their power armor. Speed and agility represent another area where custodians demonstrate clear superiority over an already superhuman baseline. A Space Marine is fast, capable of moving and reacting at speeds that make baseline humans appear to be moving in slow motion. A custodian is faster still. Combat accounts describe custodians as blurs of gold on the battlefield, moving so quickly that even enemy Space Marines struggle to track their movements. They possess reaction times, measured in fractions of a second, allowing them to respond to threats before most observers even recognize those threats exist. This speed extends beyond simple running velocity or reaction time. It manifests as combat prowess of the highest order, the ability to flow from one killing stroke to the next, with a fluidity that makes their movements appear almost like a deadly dance. Custodians can process combat situations and respond with optimal counters faster than their opponents can complete their attacks. This creates a multiplicative effect in battle, where a custodian can engage multiple enemies simultaneously. Their enhanced speed, allowing them to neutralize one threat, shift position, and engage the next in the time it takes a normal warrior to complete a single attack sequence. There are accounts of individual custodians blitzing Space Marine formations, moving so quickly that the Astartes cannot bring their weapons to bear effectively before the custodian has closed distance and engaged in melee, where their superior strength and skill can be brought to bear most effectively. Shield Captain Vendatha's assault on word-bearer positions during the Horus Heresy provides an excellent example. When engaging the Primarch Lorgar's bodyguards, Vendatha moved with such speed that even those enhanced Astartes veterans found themselves unable to react quickly enough to prevent him from reaching his target. He leapt at the Primarch himself, Guardian's spear spinning in a pattern too fast for the eye to fully follow, forcing 4 word-bearers to attempt to intercede and dying for their trouble before Vendatha could be slowed. The endurance of a custodian surpasses even their impressive strength and speed. They can fight for weeks on end without rest, maintaining peak combat effectiveness through conditions that would see Space Marines degraded and baseline humans long dead.
You know, after diving deep into all this lore about the Custodians, I have to say something that's been on my mind. When I first got into Warhammer 40k, I thought Space Marines were the absolute peak, right? The Emperor's finest. But then you learn about the Custodians and realize the Space Marines are basically the mass market version of perfection. While each Custodian is a handcrafted masterpiece, it's like comparing a really good factory-made sword to one forged by a master craftsman who spent years on that single blade. Both will get the job done, but one is just on a completely different level. What really gets me is that the Emperor cared enough about these warriors to personally name each one with 1,000-word names. That's not something you do for tools or weapons. That's what you do for people who you genuinely value. And I think that distinction is what makes the Custodians so fascinating. They're not just better fighters, they're the Emperor's actual companions, his friends, turned into the ultimate guardians. Anyway, let's get back to how ridiculously powerful these golden warriors actually are.
During the war in the Webway, Custodians fought a grueling campaign that lasted years, facing endless waves of demonic hordes in battles that saw no respite, no opportunity to recover or resupply. Toward the end of that terrible war, Custodians who had been fighting for weeks without sleep, barely any sustenance, and accumulating injuries that would have killed most beings several times over, continued to hold the line against the forces of chaos. Their ability to continue functioning despite such extreme conditions speaks to the fundamental resilience built into their enhanced biology. This endurance extends to injury tolerance. Custodians can fight on through wounds that would incapacitate or kill other warriors. There are accounts of Custodians continuing to fight with half their face destroyed, with portions of their skull removed by enemy fire, with injuries that would put even Space Marines out of action. They possess regenerative capabilities that allow them to heal from terrible wounds given time, their enhanced biology working to repair damage at rates farthest, exceeding normal healing. Combined with their resistance to shock and their ability to compartmentalize pain, this makes Custodians incredibly difficult to put down. Anything less than a killing shot often merely inconveniences them, and even lethal wounds may not stop a Custodian immediately, as they fight on through their last moments to complete their mission. The physical stature of a Custodian contributes to their imposing presence on the battlefield. They stand taller than Space Marines, who themselves tower over baseline humans. Constantin Valdor, the first Captain General of the Custodians, was recorded as being the same height as Alfarius, smallest of the Primarchs. While not all Custodians reach such heights, they uniformly stand at least a full head taller than the average Space Marine. This size, combined with the perfect proportions of their enhanced physiology, creates an imposing figure that projects authority and power even when standing motionless. Their senses have been enhanced to levels that approach or exceed the most advanced sensor arrays available to the Imperium. Custodians can see across spectrums invisible to baseline humans, track targets through sensory input that would overwhelm normal humans, and process the entirety of a battlefield with a clarity that gives them near omniscience within their area of operations. They can hear conversations at distances measured in hundreds of meters, detect threats through scent and air pressure changes, and feel vibrations that warn them of approaching enemies through solid terrain. These enhanced senses combine with their cognitive abilities to create a warrior who is almost impossible to surprise and who can process battlefield information at a rate that grants them enormous tactical advantages. Perhaps most remarkably, Custodians are effectively immortal outside of violence. They do not age in any conventional sense. Once the transformation is complete and they reach full maturity, Custodians maintain that peak condition indefinitely. There are Custodians in the 41st Millennium who have been serving for 10,000 years since the Horus Heresy, their bodies showing no signs of age-related degradation. This longevity means that each Custodian represents not just a supremely capable warrior, but also a living repository of experience spanning centuries or even millennia. They have fought in wars that are now legends, faced enemies that no longer exist, and accumulated wisdom that makes them invaluable as advisors and strategic assets beyond their already formidable combat capabilities. The combination of strength, speed, endurance, heightened senses, and effective immortality creates a physical package that places Custodians at the absolute pinnacle of what humanity can achieve through enhancement. They are living weapons, their bodies honed to perfection through the Emperor's art, and maintained at that peak through training and actual combat across lifespans that dwarf those of even the long-lived Space Marines. In any physical contest, in any test of strength, speed, or endurance, a Custodian can be expected to outperform other warriors of humanity with consistency that borders on certainty. They are, quite simply, the Emperor's finest in every physical sense of the term. Beyond mere physical prowess, the combat abilities of the Custodians represent the pinnacle of martial achievement in the Imperium. Their fighting style, techniques, and approach to warfare reflect thousands of years of accumulated experience and training methods that have been perfected across millennia. To understand how strong Custodians are in combat requires examining not just what they can do physically, but how they apply those capabilities in actual battle, how they think about warfare, and what makes their approach to fighting distinct from even the Space Marines. A Custodian's combat training begins essentially from birth and continues throughout their extremely long lives. Unlike Space Marines, who are trained primarily as soldiers and warriors, Custodians are educated in a vastly broader range of disciplines. They master not just weapons and combat techniques, but also history, philosophy, art, diplomacy, and countless other fields of study. This broad education serves a practical purpose in combat, creating warriors who can analyze situations from multiple angles, who understand the larger strategic picture beyond immediate tactical concerns, and who can adapt their fighting style to exploit enemy weaknesses that less educated warriors might not recognize. The signature weapon of the Custodian Guard is the Guardian's Spear, a masterwork that embodies the dual nature of Custodian combat doctrine. These weapons are halberd-like power weapons that incorporate a bolter weapon into their structure, allowing a Custodian to fight effectively at both range and in melee without requiring a weapon switch. The spear's blade crackles with power field, energy capable of cutting through the most advanced armor, while the bolter portion fires shells that can punch through ceramite at ranges that give Custodians flexibility in how they engage their enemies. This weapon duality reflects the custodian philosophy of being supreme generalists, capable of handling any combat situation without needing specialized support. But the guardian spear is merely a tool, and the true weapon is the custodian wielding it. Custodians train with their weapons for centuries, developing muscle memory and technique so ingrained that their movements in combat flow with a fluidity that appears effortless. They can spin their spears in great arcs that clear entire groups of enemies, shift seamlessly from ranged combat to melee, and execute strikes with a precision that exploits the tiniest openings in enemy defenses. When a custodian fights, every movement serves a purpose, every strike calculated to maximize effect while minimizing wasted motion. Central to custodian combat doctrine are the martial katas, specialized fighting stances and techniques that each custodian masters over decades or centuries of practice. These katas represent different philosophies of combat, different approaches to analyzing and defeating enemies. The Kaptaris stance focuses on severing command structures and eliminating key enemy leaders. The Rendax stance concentrates on cleaving through enemy armor and destroying heavily protected targets. The Dakatarai stance emphasizes sustained assault, overwhelming enemies through unrelenting offensive pressure. The Maratha stance prioritizes protection of key strategic assets and positions. The Salvus stance enhances defensive capabilities, making custodians even more difficult to wound. The Callista stance improves maneuverability and speed, allowing custodians to outpace and outposition their enemies. A custodian can shift between these stances as combat situations evolve, adapting their approach to match, changing battlefield conditions. This flexibility sets them apart from more rigid fighting doctrines. Where Space Marines often specialize, individual Astartes becoming experts in particular weapons or tactics, custodians are trained to master all approaches to combat. Every custodian can fight effectively in any role, adapt to any situation, and engage any enemy type with techniques optimized for that specific threat. They are the ultimate generalists, warriors without weaknesses or gaps in their combat capabilities. The individualistic nature of custodian combat doctrine represents another significant difference from Space Marine approaches. Astartes are trained to fight as squads, to operate as part of a larger whole, where individual warriors support each other and work together to achieve objectives. This squad-based approach creates powerful synergies and allows Space Marines to punch above their weight class through coordinated tactics. Custodians, in contrast, are trained to be self-sufficient combatants. Each one is capable of operating independently, making their own tactical decisions, and achieving objectives without requiring support. This doesn't mean custodians cannot work together effectively. They can and do form combat units that fight with coordination and mutual support. But their coordination is less about rigid squad tactics and more about individual excellence multiplied by proximity. When multiple custodians fight together, each one remains essentially an independent operator who happens to be fighting near allies. They don't rely on their brothers to cover weaknesses because they have no exploitable weaknesses. They don't need complex squad tactics because each custodian is capable of handling threats that would require an entire Space Marine squad to address. This fighting philosophy stems directly from their original purpose. Custodians were created to be the Emperor's personal bodyguards and companions, not frontline soldiers for conquering the galaxy. They needed to be capable of protecting the Emperor even if completely isolated, even if outnumbered and surrounded, even if facing threats that would overwhelm entire squads of lesser warriors. Their training and capabilities reflect this requirement for individual supreme excellence rather than squad-based synergy. In actual combat, this manifests as custodians who can hold defensive positions against overwhelming numbers, who can conduct surgical strikes deep into enemy territory alone or in small groups, who can eliminate high-value targets through direct assault rather than requiring elaborate tactical planning. There are numerous accounts of individual custodians achieving feats that would require entire Space Marine units to accomplish. During the Siege of Terra, Custodians conducted counterattacks against Death Guard forces, with individual Golden Warriors killing dozens or even hundreds of Chaos Space Marines before being brought down through weight of numbers and accumulated damage. Constantin Valdor's combat prowess provides perhaps the best example of what a Custodian can achieve in battle. During the burning of Prospero, Valdor encountered 30,000 Sons Kenetai occult members, elite blade masters who were psychically enhanced, and represented some of the finest warriors the 15th Legion could field. These were not rank-and-file space marines, but specialized duelists trained to fight with supernatural skill. Valdor killed all 30 without taking a wound, overwhelming them through a combination of superior speed, strength, technique, and tactical awareness. For context, any one of those Kenetai would have been a match for most Space Marine captains in single combat. Valdor dispatched 30 of them as if they were barely an inconvenience. Other Custodians have demonstrated similar levels of combat effectiveness. Shield Captain Vendatha's assault on Word-Bearer forces saw him kill a chaplain, a captain, and multiple veteran Astartes in rapid succession, moving too quickly for them to mount an effective defense. Tribune Amon's confrontation with the Genestock Ogres demonstrated that even unarmored Custodians could dispatch threats that would challenge armored Space Marines. Shield Captain Valerian's actions during various battles in the 41st Millennium showed Custodians continuing to perform at levels far exceeding Space Marine capabilities, despite the passage of 10,000 years. The combat doctrine of the Custodians emphasizes efficiency and brutality. They do not prolong fights unnecessarily or engage in elaborate dueling rituals. When a Custodian fights, their goal is to neutralize the threat as quickly as possible, using the minimum force required. This creates a fighting style that appears almost casual in its effectiveness. Custodians make killing look easy, their movements so perfectly economical and their techniques so refined that they eliminate threats with what appears to be minimal effort. This efficiency is deceptive. Behind every seemingly casual strike lies centuries of training, perfect understanding of leverage and anatomy, and the physical capabilities to execute techniques that would be impossible for lesser warriors. Against enemies who are not themselves enhanced warriors, Custodians are essentially unstoppable. Baseline humans, even those with exceptional training and equipment, cannot meaningfully threaten a Custodian. The Golden Warriors can wade through mortal soldiers like farmers harvesting wheat, their weapons reaping lives with every stroke. Even against elite baseline soldiers, stormtroopers and the like who represent the very best warriors that unenhanced humanity can produce, Custodians are so overwhelmingly superior that combat becomes more an exercise in efficiently processing targets than an actual fight. Against Xenos threats, Custodians have repeatedly demonstrated their superiority. They have fought Tyranid swarms, with small groups of Custodians holding defensive positions against countless alien organisms. They have battled greenskin hordes, with individual Custodians accounting for hundreds or thousands of alien deaths before the enemy could bring them down through sheer numbers. They have engaged Aeldari warriors, matching even those ancient Xenos' legendary speed and skill, and emerging victorious through superior strength and resilience. Against every major Xenos threat in the galaxy, Custodians have proven themselves capable of fighting and winning against odds that would see other forces destroyed. Perhaps most impressively, Custodians have fought demons, those entities of the warp, whose very existence is antithetical to mortal life, and whose mere presence can drive lesser beings to madness. During the war in the Webway, Custodians faced endless demonic hordes for years, fighting through conditions that would have broken even Space Marines through accumulated horror and exhaustion. They faced greater demons, bloodthirsters, and lords of change and other supreme entities of the warp. And while the battles were terrible, and the cost in Custodian lives was significant, they held the line. They kept the demons from breaching through to Terra itself, accomplishing what might be the single most important defensive action in the entire history of the Imperium. The Custodians' resistance to chaos corruption proved crucial in those battles, where Space Marines fighting demons must constantly guard against the insidious whispers of the warp, must rely on faith and willpower to resist corruption. Custodians possess an innate resistance that makes them far less vulnerable. This allows them to fight demons, not just physically, but also spiritually, standing firm against temptations and horrors that would corrupt other warriors. Their creation, by the Emperor's own hand, seems to have imprinted upon them a spark of his power that wards off the worst effects of demonic influence. Summary: the combat prowess of the Custodians represents the absolute pinnacle of martial ability in the Imperium. They are warriors who have mastered every aspect of fighting, who combine supreme physical capabilities with centuries or millennia of experience, who wield weapons and techniques refined over 10,000 years of constant warfare. They can fight alone or in groups, can adapt to any battlefield situation, can engage any enemy type, and can be expected to emerge victorious in any combat situation short of being overwhelmed by truly massive numerical superiority or facing opponents who themselves operate at apocalyptic power levels, such as Primarchs or greater demons. Against almost any threat in the galaxy, a Custodian is one of the finest weapons the Imperium can deploy. The weapons and equipment employed by the Custodians are as extraordinary as the warriors who wield them. Every piece of war gear a Custodian carries represents the absolute pinnacle of the Imperium's crafting ability, created without regard to cost or rarity of materials, and maintained with a level of care that borders on religious devotion. Understanding the strength of the Custodians requires examining not just what they can do, but also what tools they use to accomplish their missions. For the equipment they bear multiplies their already formidable capabilities to truly devastating levels. At the heart of Custodian wargear is auramite, that rare and precious metal that gives their armor its distinctive golden hue. Auramite is not simply a decorative choice or a matter of tradition. It is a substance with properties that make it ideal for the Emperor's guardians. At the quantum level, auramite is nearly inert, which makes it far less of an impediment to the manipulation of psychic energy than other protective materials. This property was crucial when the Emperor himself wore auramite battleplate while fighting his immaterial battles within the warp during the war in the Webway. The auramite armor allowed him to channel immense psychic energies without the interference that other materials would have caused, proving that even for a being of the Emperor's power, the choice of armor material mattered. For the Custodians, auramite serves multiple purposes. It provides exceptional physical protection, being harder and more resilient than the ceramite used in Space Marine power armor. It is also lighter relative to its protective capability, allowing for greater mobility without sacrificing defense. The crafting of auramite armor is an art form that has been perfected over millennia, with master artificers creating each suit specifically for the individual Custodian who will wear it. No two suits are exactly alike, each bearing unique flourishes, decorations, and adjustments that reflect both the craftsman's artistry and the warrior's individual requirements. A suit of Custodian armor takes longer to create than the mass-produced power armor issued to Space Marines, where Astarte's armor is manufactured in patterns that allow for relatively quick production and easy repair using interchangeable parts. Custodian armor is handcrafted, each piece individually formed and fitted. The result is armor that fits perfectly, that moves as a second skin rather than a bulky shell, that provides protection far exceeding standard power armor while maintaining flexibility and agility. The servo motors in Custodian armor are crafted with such precision that they operate silently, allowing these warriors to move without the mechanical whine that typically announces the presence of power-armored troops. The armor incorporates sophisticated sensor systems that rival or exceed those found in the most advanced Space Marine Terminator plate. Custodians have access to full-spectrum visual enhancement, audio pickups sensitive enough to detect whispered conversations at extreme range, threat detection systems that can identify dangers before they become critical, and communications arrays that maintain contact even in environments where normal Vox systems fail. The armor's autosenses filter and process this sensory information, presenting it to the custodian in formats that can be instantly understood and acted upon, creating a symbiosis between warrior and armor that enhances combat effectiveness dramatically. Beyond the armor's protective and sensory capabilities, it also incorporates field generators that create energy shields around the wearer. These refractor fields can deflect or absorb incoming attacks, adding another layer of protection beyond the physical armor itself. Combined with the Auramite's natural resistance to damage and the Custodian's own enhanced resilience, this creates a defensive package that makes Custodians extraordinarily difficult to kill. Weapons that would punch through Space Marine armor are deflected by the combination of fields and superior plate. Attacks that manage to penetrate the armor still must deal with the Custodian's enhanced physiology and regenerative abilities. Some Custodians further augment their defense by carrying Presidium shields, ornate storm shields forged from nearly indestructible layered ceramite and resilient alloys, reinforced with built-in field generators. These shields can intercept attacks that would otherwise strike the Custodian or nearby allies, creating mobile defensive positions that can advance under even the heaviest fire. The shields are sized and weighted for beings of the Custodian's enhanced strength, making them far too heavy for normal humans or even Space Marines to effectively wield while maintaining combat effectiveness. The Guardian Spear remains the iconic weapon of the Custodian Guard, but it is far from the only armament these warriors carry. The spear itself is a marvel of engineering, a power weapon whose blade can cut through the heaviest armor while also incorporating a fully functional bolter that fires specialized ammunition. The bolter portion, sometimes called a lastrum bolt weapon, fires shells that are more powerful than standard Space Marine bolt rounds, with enhanced penetration capabilities and greater explosive yield. The power blade component crackles with energy that disrupts molecular bonds, allowing it to cleave through materials that would resist normal weapons. Other Custodians favor different primary weapons depending on their role and personal preference. Sentinel blades, shorter power swords that allow for greater speed and flexibility in close combat, are popular among Custodians who prefer aggressive, mobile fighting styles. Castellan axes combine the cleaving power of an axe with integrated ranged weapons, offering different tactical options than the Guardian Spear. All of these weapons are crafted with the same attention to quality and detail as the armor, each one a masterwork that would be considered a priceless relic in any Space Marine chapter, but which is standard issue among the 10,000. Additionally, every Custodian carries a Misericordia, a power knife designed for close-quarters fighting and mercy killing. These blades are small enough to be easily concealed, but deadly enough to pierce armor and end lives with single strikes. The Misericordia serves both as a backup weapon and as a tool for executing enemies who are wounded but not yet dead, ensuring that defeated foes do not rise again to threaten the Custodian or their mission objectives. For ranged combat, beyond what the integrated bolters on their primary weapons provide, Custodians have access to specialized firearms that exceed Space Marine equivalents in power and sophistication. The Adrastus Bolt Caliver, for example, is a long-range weapon capable of engaging targets at distances where normal bolters lose effectiveness. Adrathic weapons, also called disintegration beams, fire streams of energy that literally unmake their targets at the atomic level, leaving nothing behind but dust. These weapons are rare even among the Custodians, remnants of Dark Age technology that cannot be replicated by the Mechanicum, but they demonstrate the level of technological sophistication available to the Emperor's Guardians. Beyond personal weapons, the Custodians field vehicles that reflect the same philosophy of quality over quantity that governs all their equipment. Their vehicles are almost exclusively anti-gravity platforms, using technology that makes them faster and more maneuverable than ground-based vehicles, while also providing superior mobility over difficult terrain. The Coronis Grav Carrier serves as their primary transport, a sleek vehicle that can carry a squad of custodians at high speed while providing significant protection from enemy fire. Unlike the boxy, functional design of Space Marine Rhinos and other transports, the Coronis reflects the aesthetic sensibilities of the Custodians, combining elegant form with devastating function. The Caladius Pattern Grav tank serves as heavy support, mounting weapons powerful enough to threaten enemy armor and fortifications, while maintaining the speed and agility expected of Custodian vehicles. The Palace Grav attack fulfills a role similar to Space Marine land speeders, but with superior performance in every category, mounting weapons that can eliminate both infantry and armored targets with equal effectiveness. The Paragon jet bikes, ridden by the Virtus Praetors, are perhaps the most iconic of Custodian vehicles, allowing these warriors to strike with incredible speed, while wielding lance weapons capable of penetrating even the heaviest armor. All of these vehicles incorporate technologies that the Mechanicum cannot fully replicate, systems derived from the Dark Age of technology and maintained through ancient pacts between the Custodians and specific artificer families on Terra who have served the 10,000 since before the Imperium was founded. This technological edge gives Custodian vehicles performance characteristics that exceed their Space Marine equivalents, just as Custodian armor exceeds Astartes plate, and Custodian weapons exceed standard Imperial armaments. The Custodians also field specialized equipment for specific missions and roles. The Alaris Custodians, who serve in Terminator-style armor, wear suits that combine the protection of Terminator plate with the technological sophistication of standard Custodian armor, creating warriors who can teleport directly into the heart of enemy positions and emerge from those insertions to wreak havoc with impunity. Their Castellan axes and Guardian spears are scaled for their armor, larger and more powerful than standard versions, while maintaining the same craftsmanship and quality. The Venatari, Custodians who employ jump packs and specialized aerial combat techniques, use equipment that allows them to fight in 3 dimensions, striking from unexpected angles and withdrawing before enemies can effectively respond. Their weapons and armor are modified to accommodate the unique demands of aerial combat, while maintaining the defensive and offensive capabilities expected of all Custodian war gear. Every piece of equipment a Custodian uses is maintained with care that verges on the fanatical. Artificers check and service the armor and weapons regularly, replacing components before they can fail, upgrading systems as new technologies become available, and ensuring that every Custodian goes into battle with equipment functioning at absolute peak performance. This maintenance regimen, combined with the superior quality of the equipment itself, means that Custodian war gear almost never fails in combat, eliminating a source of uncertainty that even Space Marines must contend with. The value of Custodian equipment cannot be measured merely in currency or resources, though it is true that a single suit of Custodian armor is worth more than many planetary economies. The true value lies in how this equipment multiplies the effectiveness of warriors who are already supreme combatants. A Custodian without armor or weapons would still be a formidable threat to most enemies through sheer physical capability and centuries of training. A Custodian fully equipped with auramite plate, master-crafted weapons, and sophisticated support systems becomes a one-warrior army capable of accomplishing objectives that would require entire companies of lesser troops to achieve. The equipment philosophy of the Custodians reflects their overall approach to warfare, where Space Marines field armies numbered in the thousands or tens of thousands, equipped with good but not exceptional war gear, produced through efficient manufacturing processes. Custodians field far smaller forces equipped with the absolute best equipment available. Each Custodian represents a massive investment of resources, time, and expertise, and their equipment reflects that same investment. The result is warriors who can fight and win against enemies that would overwhelm far larger forces of lesser troops, who can operate in environments that would defeat other warriors, and who can accomplish objectives that others would consider impossible. The sight of custodians in their golden armor, wielding weapons that crackle with barely contained power, advancing with the confidence of warriors who know they carry the finest equipment humanity can produce, is one that inspires awe in allies and terror in enemies. They are living proof that quality can overwhelm quantity, that individual excellence combined with superior equipment can achieve what masses of lesser warriors cannot. In a galaxy where humanity is constantly outnumbered, constantly fighting for survival against enemies that exceed human strength or technology, the Custodians stand as examples of what can be achieved when human ingenuity and resources are focused to create not armies, but individual paragons of martial perfection. The mental capabilities of the Custodians represent an often overlooked but crucial aspect of their overall strength. While their physical prowess and combat skills rightfully draw attention, it is their enhanced intellect and unshakable mental fortitude that elevate them from mere warriors to the ultimate guardians and counselors that the Emperor intended them to be. Understanding the full strength of the Custodians requires examining not just what they can do physically, but also how they think, learn, and resist threats that target the mind rather than the body. The cognitive enhancements that Custodians receive as part of their creation process place their intellect far above that of baseline humans and significantly beyond even the already formidable mental capabilities of space marines. A Custodian's brain has been optimized at the cellular level, with neural pathways enhanced for faster signal transmission, greater connectivity between different regions, and improved efficiency in processing and storing information. The result is a mind capable of analyzing complex situations with speed and accuracy that would require computational assistance for lesser beings to match. This enhanced intellect manifests in several ways. Custodians possess memory that approaches perfect recall, able to remember events, conversations, and details from decades or even centuries past, with clarity that does not fade with time. This perfect memory serves practical purposes in combat, allowing Custodians to learn from every engagement and never make the same tactical error twice. It also makes them invaluable as advisors and counselors, for they can draw upon centuries of accumulated experience to inform their recommendations on matters of strategy, policy, and governance. Beyond memory, Custodians possess analytical capabilities that allow them to process tactical and strategic situations with remarkable speed and accuracy. In combat, they can assess threats, identify optimal responses, and execute those responses faster than most opponents can even recognize the threats exist. This creates an apparent precognition, where Custodians seem to respond to attacks before they are launched, because they have read the opponent's body language, analyzed the tactical situation, and predicted the most likely enemy actions before those actions begin. This analytical capability extends far beyond immediate tactical concerns. Custodians are trained in strategic thinking, able to see how local actions connect to larger strategic objectives, how immediate decisions will ripple outward to affect future outcomes, and how different choices create cascading consequences that must be anticipated and planned for. They can conduct what military theorists call second-order thinking, analyzing not just immediate effects, but also the effects of those effects, thinking multiple steps ahead in ways that allow them to set conditions for success well in advance of critical moments. The education of a Custodian encompasses far more than warfare. They are trained in history, studying not just the major campaigns and battles that shaped the Imperium, but also the political, economic, and social factors that led to those conflicts. They master philosophy, learning to think about questions of ethics, governance, and human nature that inform their understanding of why they fight and what they are protecting. They study art and culture, understanding that the Imperium is more than territory, and resources, but also represents human achievements in beauty, creativity, and expression. They learn diplomacy and statecraft, preparing them to serve as the emperor's representatives in situations where force is not the answer and skilled negotiation is required. This broad education creates warriors who are also scholars, fighters who are also philosophers, soldiers who are also diplomats. A custodian can discuss complex philosophical concepts with imperial savants, debate strategic doctrine with fleet admirals, and engage in diplomatic negotiations with planetary governors or even inquisitors, all while maintaining their readiness to respond to threats with lethal force if negotiations fail. This versatility stems directly from the Emperor's original vision for what his companions should be: complete individuals, fully realized humans who happen to be supreme warriors, but who were also capable of functioning at the highest levels in any role that required excellence. The psychological conditioning that custodians undergo as part of their creation and training instills unshakable loyalty to the Emperor and a sense of duty that transcends normal human concepts of service. But this conditioning does not create mindless automatons who simply follow orders. Instead, it creates warriors who understand why their service matters, who have chosen duty after being educated enough to understand what they are choosing. A custodian serves not because they cannot do otherwise, but because they have been shown the importance of their role and have accepted that responsibility with full understanding of what it entails. This creates an interesting dynamic where custodians are simultaneously absolutely loyal and fiercely independent. They will not betray their duty or turn from their purpose, but within the bounds of that duty, they think for themselves, make their own tactical and strategic decisions, and sometimes disagree with orders from other imperial authorities if they believe those orders conflict with the emperor's true interests. This independence of thought has occasionally brought custodians into conflict with other imperial organizations, but it also makes them incorruptible in ways that even the most loyal Space Marines cannot match. Perhaps most remarkably, custodians possess an innate resistance to psychic attacks and demonic influence that goes beyond mere willpower or faith. This resistance, often referred to as the Aegis of the Emperor, manifests as a supernatural warding that makes psychic powers less effective against them and provides protection against the corrupting influence of chaos. The exact mechanism behind this resistance is not fully understood, but it appears to stem from the spark of the Emperor's own power that was woven into their creation. It is as if every custodian carries a tiny fragment of the Emperor's essence within them, and that fragment wards off the powers of the warp, just as the Emperor's own presence does. In practical terms, this resistance means that psychic attacks that would reduce baseline humans to screaming wrecks or turn Space Marines into mindless thralls are significantly less effective against custodians. They can resist mind control, shrug off psychic assaults that would cause terrible wounds to others, and maintain mental clarity in the presence of demonic entities that drive lesser beings to madness through their mere existence. This resistance is not absolute immunity. Powerful enough psykers or greater demons can still affect custodians, but the level of power required to overcome their natural resistance is significantly higher than what would be needed to affect other warriors. This psychic resistance proved crucial during the war in the Webway, where custodians fought against endless demonic hordes in conditions where the barrier between reality and the warp was thin or non-existent. Space Marines fighting in similar conditions required constant prayer, meditation, and faith to resist corruption. Custodians, while still vigilant against chaos, possessed an innate resistance that allowed them to fight effectively, even when surrounded by demonic influence that would have broken other warriors. They could stand before greater demons without flinching, resist the whispered temptations of chaos gods, and maintain their sense of self and purpose, even when exposed to horrors that should have driven them to madness or corruption. The combination of enhanced intellect, perfect memory, broad education, psychological conditioning, and psychic resistance creates minds that are as formidable as custodian bodies. These warriors do not simply follow orders blindly or rely purely on physical prowess to achieve victory. They think, analyze, plan, and adapt. They learn from experience and apply those lessons to future challenges. They resist mental and spiritual threats as effectively as they resist physical ones. They serve not just as weapons, but as advisors, diplomats, investigators, and guardians who can operate at the highest levels of imperial governance while remaining absolutely loyal to the emperor's vision. In many ways, the mental capabilities of the custodians are as important to their overall strength as their physical prowess. The ability to think clearly under pressure, to resist corruption and manipulation, to learn from experience and adapt to new situations, to serve as both warrior and counselor, makes them far more valuable than mere fighters could ever be. They are the emperor's eyes and ears, his voice when he can no longer speak, his will made manifest through warriors who possess the intelligence and wisdom to understand that will and execute it, even in situations the emperor could not have foreseen 10,000 years ago when he walked among his creations. The test of their full capabilities came during one of the most desperate and terrible campaigns in imperial history. The war in the Webway stands as perhaps the greatest trial the custodians have ever faced, a conflict that tested them to their absolute limits and demonstrated both the heights of their capabilities and the prices they sometimes must pay to fulfill their duty. Understanding what the custodians endured during this conflict provides crucial insight into their strength, their resilience, and their unwavering dedication to protecting the emperor and the Imperium he built. The war began with catastrophe. Magnus the Red, Primarch of the Thousand Sons Legion, sought to warn the Emperor of Horus's treachery through psychic means, despite the Emperor's explicit prohibition on such communication. Magnus's warning, though well-intentioned, was delivered with such psychic force that it shattered the wards the Emperor had placed around the Imperial Palace. These wards were not simply defensive barriers, but also the psychic containment that protected the human-built portions of the Webway, that vast network of extra-dimensional tunnels that the Emperor intended to use to free humanity from dependence on warp travel. When Magnus's psychic warning breached these protections, it tore open a gateway that allowed demonic hordes to pour into the Webway and threaten terror itself. The Emperor, forced to abandon his other works, took his place upon the Golden Throne to maintain a psychic barrier that would prevent the demons from breaching through into the Imperial Palace and ultimately terror. But maintaining that barrier required his constant attention. His full psychic might devote it to holding back the endless tide of chaos. He could not fight the physical battle himself. That task fell to the custodians, the Sisters of Silence who served alongside them, and the Mechanicum workers who labored desperately to repair the damaged sections of the Webway. The custodians responded to this crisis as they had responded to every challenge throughout their existence, with absolute dedication and supreme martial skill. They deployed into the Webway in force, establishing defensive positions and fortifications at key points along the network of tunnels. Their mission was simple in concept, but almost impossible in execution. Hold the line against the demonic hordes for as long as necessary to allow the Mechanicum to repair the breaches and seal the gateway. No one, not even the Emperor himself, could say how long this would take. Days, weeks, months, or years the custodians would have to hold against an enemy that was literally infinite in numbers and that could not be permanently killed. The pattern of the war quickly established itself. The custodians and sisters created defensive positions, fortified barriers across the tunnel networks that channeled the demonic attacks into killing zones where the defenders could bring maximum firepower to bear. Behind these defensive lines, Mechanicum workers labored to repair damaged sections of tunnel and seal rifts through which more demons were entering. In front of the lines, Custodian strike forces launched lightning-fast counterattacks to keep the demonic hordes off balance, preventing them from massing for coordinated assaults that might overwhelm the defensive positions. For a time, this strategy succeeded. The Custodians, fighting in an environment that played to their strengths as individual supremely capable warriors, carved through demonic hordes with brutal efficiency. Their weapons, blessed by the Emperor's own hand and crafted from materials resistant to warp corruption, could permanently destroy lesser demons and wound even greater demons in ways that sent them screaming back to the Imperium. Their innate resistance to chaos corruption allowed them to fight in conditions that would have quickly corrupted or driven mad other warriors. Their perfect coordination, honed through centuries of training and actual combat, allowed them to concentrate force at critical points while maintaining defensive depth across a broad front. But as the war continued, the situation grew more desperate. The powers of chaos, recognizing the threat that a fully functional human webway would pose to their ability to influence the material realm, committed more and more forces to the battle. Lesser demons were joined by greater demons, mighty entities whose power exceeded that of all but the most exceptional warriors. Bloodthirsters, those towering avatars of Khorne's rage, waded into battle against the Custodians, seeking to match the martial prowess of the Emperor's finest warriors. Lords of Change, the scheming greater demons of Tzeentch, employed sorcery that twisted reality and subverted imperial defenses. The demonic tide, already countless in number, swelled to proportions that seemed truly endless. Worse still, the forces of chaos began committing mortal assets to the war. Traitor space marines, warriors who had turned from the Emperor's light to serve the dark gods, entered the webway to fight against their former brothers. Traitor titans, those god machines whose loyalty had been corrupted, brought their apocalyptic firepower to bear on Custodian defensive positions. The war escalated from a desperate defensive action against demonic hordes to a full-scale conflict, involving the full might of both sides. The Custodians fought on. They fought for weeks that became months, months that became years. They fought without rest, without rotation, without the basutong, relief that normal military operations would provide. Sleep became a luxury many could not afford. Food and water were consumed only when the tactical situation briefly allowed. Wounds that would normally require treatment and recovery time were bandaged and ignored. Warriors continuing to fight despite injuries that would have incapacitated others. The Golden Warriors, supreme as they were, began to show the strain of this endless conflict. Casualties mounted. For all their skill, all their enhanced resilience, all their superior equipment, the Custodians were not invincible. When greater demons or traitor Primarch level threats engaged them, even Custodians could fall. When demonic hordes swarmed defensive positions with literally endless numbers, even the finest warriors could be overwhelmed through sheer weight of attacks. Custodians fell, their deaths bought with terrible costs to the enemy, but deaths nonetheless. Each fallen warrior represented decades of investment lost, irreplaceable skill and experience extinguished, and a slight weakening of the defensive line that the surviving Custodians had to compensate for by fighting even harder. The most terrible battles occurred when demonic assaults breached through the defensive lines and reached the warp gate of the Golden Throne itself. On these occasions, desperate fighting ensued at the very threshold of the Imperial Palace, with the Custodians and Sisters of Silence throwing everything they had into preventing the demons from surging through the gate and into the Imperial dungeon beyond. These defensive actions, fought with the knowledge that failure would doom Terra itself, saw the Custodians push themselves beyond their already formidable limits. They fought with a ferocity born of absolute necessity, knowing that retreat was impossible and defeat was unacceptable. 3 tribunes served as the senior commanders of the combined Custodian, Sisters of Silence, and Mechanicum forces in the Webway: Kadai, Jasarik, and Ra Endymion. These warriors bore the terrible burden of command in a war that seemed to have no end and no path to victory beyond simply holding on until the Emperor could find some solution. Of these three, Ra Endymion would play a crucial role in the war's ultimate resolution, though at a cost that still resonates 10,000 years later. As the war dragged on toward its conclusion, the Custodians fighting in the webway were described as exhausted beyond measure, having fought for weeks without sleep and barely any rest at all. They continued to hold their positions, continued to fight with the skill and determination expected of the Emperor's guardians, but they were being ground down through sheer attrition. The question was not whether they would hold. The Custodians would hold until they were all dead, if that was what was required. The question was whether a solution could be found before their numbers were whittled down to the point where they could no longer maintain an effective defense. The Emperor, seeing his warriors being destroyed in this endless grinding battle and recognizing that the situation was unsustainable, finally took direct action. He briefly left the Golden Throne, using his full power to manifest in the webway and burn through the demonic hordes with psychic fire that turned warp entities to ash and vapor. He summoned forth avatars of fallen warriors, including deceased Custodians and Space Marines, wreathing them in his psychic flame and sending them forth to battle the demons. For a brief time, the Emperor himself fought alongside his Custodians, and in those moments, the tide of battle shifted dramatically as the Master of Mankind demonstrated why he was worshipped as a god. But even this divine intervention could not permanently solve the problem. A demon appeared during this battle, an entity called Drachnien that claimed to be the Emperor's end. The Emperor, recognizing that he could not kill this particular demon without catastrophic consequences, instead sealed it into the body of Tribune Ra Endymion. The Custodian, chosen for reasons known only to the Emperor, was commanded to run into the depths of the webway, carrying this terrible burden within him, drawing the demon away from Terra and imprisoning it within a Custodian's body where it could be contained if not destroyed. The Emperor's intervention gave the surviving Imperial forces time to evacuate the webway. As they withdrew, the Emperor sealed himself upon the Golden Throne, this time not as a temporary measure, but as a permanent imprisonment. He would maintain the psychic barrier against the demonic horde indefinitely, or for as long as his body could endure, keeping the gate closed through sheer force of will while his consciousness fought an endless battle in the Imperium. The Custodians withdrew from the webway, having held the line for as long as was necessary, having sacrificed thousands of their number in that terrible war, but having ultimately prevented the demonic hordes from breaking through to Terra. The cost to the Custodians was devastating. Of the 10,000 who had fought in the Great Crusade and during the early years of the Horus Heresy, a significant portion were lost in the war in the webway. The exact casualties have never been publicly disclosed, but accounts suggest that the Custodians suffered losses that would have completely destroyed a Space Marine Legion multiple times over. Only their supreme individual capability, their resistance to chaos corruption, and their absolute refusal to break or retreat allowed them to endure long enough for the Emperor to implement his final solution. The war in the webway demonstrated several crucial truths about the Custodians. It showed that they could fight for extended periods under conditions that would break other warriors, maintaining effectiveness even when exhausted, wounded, and facing seemingly infinite enemies. It proved their resistance to chaos corruption was real and substantial, allowing them to fight demons directly for years without succumbing to the madness and corruption that would have claimed Space Marines in similar circumstances. It revealed that even warriors as supreme as the Custodians could be overwhelmed if the odds were sufficiently impossible and the campaign sufficiently prolonged. But perhaps, most importantly, the war in the webway showed that the Custodians would never break, never surrender, never fail in their duty, no matter the cost. They held the line for as long as was necessary, knowing that failure meant not just their own deaths, but the destruction of Terra and potentially the entire Imperium. They fulfilled their purpose as the Emperor's guardians in the most literal sense, standing between their master and the infinite hordes of chaos. buying time with their blood and their lives, holding despite odds that should have been mathematically impossible to overcome. The war in the webway left scars on the Custodians that would last for 10 millennia. The survivors were haunted by the memories of that terrible conflict, by the sight of their brothers falling despite their skill and power, by the knowledge that their duty had required them to fight until they were nearly destroyed as a fighting force. The edict of restraint that followed the Horus heresy, limiting the Custodians to the defense of the imperial palace, was influenced in part by their depleted numbers after the Webway War. They simply did not have the strength to deploy widely across the galaxy while still maintaining sufficient presence on Terra to guard the Emperor. But the war also proved beyond any doubt that the Custodians were everything the Emperor had created them to be. When faced with the ultimate test, when required to hold against literally impossible odds for an indefinite period, they did not just succeed, but exceeded all expectations. They demonstrated that the investment in creating them was worthwhile, that the resources and time devoted to producing individual warriors of supreme excellence could yield results that masses of lesser troops could never achieve. They showed that in the Emperor's darkest hour, his golden warriors would stand firm and hold the line, no matter what that cost them personally. Among the golden ranks of the 10,000, certain names echo through history with special resonance. While every Custodian is a warrior of supreme excellence, some have distinguished themselves even among their elite brothers through extraordinary deeds, exceptional leadership, or simply through being present at critical moments in Imperial history. Chief among these legendary figures stands Constantin Valdor, the first of the 10,000, the inaugural Captain General of the Legio Custodes, and perhaps the greatest warrior to ever serve the Emperor, save only the Primarchs themselves. Valdor's origins are shrouded in mystery even among the Custodians, who are themselves among the Imperium's most secretive organizations. What is known is that the Emperor spent considerable time and effort searching for the infant who would become Valdor, suggesting that even before his transformation, he possessed qualities that made him uniquely suited for the role he would eventually fill. Once found, that infant was subjected to the full process of Custodian creation, becoming the first of the Emperor's golden warriors and the template against which all others would be measured. The name Valdor received upon completion of his transformation was said to be composed of nearly 2,000 words, a name in the ancient Terran tradition that encompassed achievements, epithets, and descriptors that the Emperor himself bestowed. This naming tradition, practiced for all Custodians but exemplified most dramatically in Valdor's case, reflects the Emperor's personal connection to his guardians. He knew each of them not as interchangeable soldiers but as individuals, and he remembered their deeds and honored them through names that grew longer with each accomplishment. Valdor's combat prowess was legendary, even among beings of legendary martial skill. Accounts from those who witnessed him fight describe a warrior who moved with impossible speed and precision, whose mastery of weapons exceeded that of any other, save perhaps the Primarchs themselves, and whose tactical acumen allowed him to consistently emerge victorious even against opponents who should theoretically have been his equals or superiors. He wielded the Apollonian spear, a weapon believed to have been crafted by the Emperor's own hands, and imbued with properties that made it one of the deadliest artifacts in the Imperium. The spear could show its wielder something of the truth of those it killed, a gift that the Emperor hoped would prevent Valdor from becoming too callous in regards to taking life. During the burning of Prospero, when the Space Wolves were sent to censure the Thousand Sons for their violation of the Council of Nicaea's prohibition on sorcery, Valdor accompanied the expedition with a force of Custodians and Sisters of Silence. His presence was meant to ensure that Magnus was brought back to Terra to face the Emperor's judgment, rather than being executed on the spot. However, Horus's manipulation of Leman Russ transformed the mission from arrest to execution, and despite Valdor's objections and attempts at restraint, the world of Prospero burned. During the battle on Prospero, Valdor demonstrated exactly why he was considered among the Imperium's most dangerous warriors. When 30 Kenatai occult members, elite blade masters of the Thousand Suns, who were psychically enhanced and trained to superhuman levels of skill, attempted to kill him in a coordinated assault, Valdor destroyed all of them without taking a wound. These were not ordinary space marines, but specialized duelists whose abilities rivaled or exceeded those of most chapter masters. Valdor killed them as if they were barely worthy of notice, his spear carving through their ranks with a speed and precision that none of them could match. Valdor's relationship with the Primarchs was complex. He held rank and authority that exceeded theirs in certain contexts, being the Emperor's direct representative when the Emperor himself was not present. He was close in size to the smallest of the Primarchs, standing as tall as Alfarius, though not reaching the heights of giants like Vulcan or Ferrus Manus. Most importantly, there are accounts suggesting Valdor could match a Primarch in combat, at least for a time. He once dueled Alfarius to a stalemate without realizing who his opponent was, fighting the Primarch to a draw in a contest where neither could claim victory. While Alfarius later claimed he could have killed Valdor had he wished, the fact remains that Valdor fought a Primarch on equal terms, a feat no other warrior save perhaps other Primarchs could claim. During the war in the Webway, Valdor served as the overall commander of the Custodian forces, coordinating their efforts, planning strategy, and personally leading critical missions. His leadership during this desperate campaign helped keep the Custodians fighting effectively, even as their numbers were whittled down and exhaustion threatened to overcome even their enhanced endurance. He was present when the Emperor manifested in the Webway to burn back the demonic hordes, witnessed Ra Endymion being sealed with Drak Nien, and oversaw the final retreat from the Webway that saved the surviving Imperial forces. Following the Emperor's interment upon the Golden Throne after the Horus Heresy, Valdor continued to serve as Captain General, leading the Custodians through the difficult transition from their role as the Emperor's active companions to their new existence as guards over a master who could no longer walk among them. He agreed with Robut Guilliman's Edict of Restraint, the decree that limited the Custodians to the defense of the Imperial Palace, recognizing that their depleted numbers and the critical importance of guarding the Golden Throne made it impossible for them to continue active operations across the Imperium. Then, at some point following the heresy, Constantine Valdor simply vanished. The exact circumstances of his disappearance are not recorded in any accessible Imperial archives, and even the Custodians themselves do not openly discuss what became of their first Captain General. Some accounts suggest he left on a mission that he believed the Emperor required of him. Others hint at darker possibilities. The book that Bequin recovered from a Webway pocket dimension, whose first words were Constantine Valdor, suggests connections to forces and purposes that remain mysterious. Whether Valdor still lives, what he might be doing if he does, and whether he will ever return, are questions that lack any definitive answers. What is certain is that Valdor set a standard of excellence that all subsequent Captain Generals have aspired to match. His name is invoked when the Custodians need to remind themselves of what they should strive to be. His deeds serve as examples in Custodian training and doctrine. The Apollonian spear he wielded was passed to his successors, each Captain General carrying it as a symbol of their office and their connection to the first of the 10,000. Even 10,000 years after he walked the battlefields of the Great Crusade, Constantine Valdor remains the ideal against which all other Custodians measure themselves. In the 41st millennium, the Adeptus Custodes are led by Trajan Valoris, the current Captain General and 17th individual to hold that august office since Valdor's tenure. Valoris represents the modern Custodians, warriors who have adapted to the changed circumstances of the Imperium while maintaining the same uncompromising standards of excellence that have always defined the 10,000. His ascension to the rank of Captain General and his actions since taking that office demonstrate that the Custodians remain as formidable in the present day as they were during the Great Crusade 10 millennia past. Trajan Valoris's service record, even before he became Captain General, marked him as exceptional among the already exceptional Custodians. Within his first decade of service, he accomplished something that remains unmatched. He successfully ran not one, but 2 blood games. These exercises, in which a Custodian attempts to reach the Emperor's throne room through infiltration and stealth, while the rest of the Custodians attempt to stop them, are incredibly difficult. Most Custodians never complete even one successful blood game in their entire careers. Valoris completed 2 within 10 years, demonstrating skills in infiltration, misdirection, and unconventional warfare that marked him as uniquely talented even among warriors. Renowned for their capabilities, his talents as a warrior and tactician led to his assignment among the Alaris Custodians, those who wear Terminator-style armor and specialize in teleport assaults and breakthrough operations. While serving in this elite formation, Valoris distinguished himself through numerous actions. He destroyed the Space Hulk Mournful Siren, that massive conglomeration of vessels that threatened Imperial shipping lanes, leading boarding actions that saw Custodians clear the Hulk section by section of the horrors that dwelt within. He defeated the Genestealer cult of the Emperor's writhing shadow, eliminating a Xenos infestation that had taken root in a critical Imperial system. He spearheaded a preemptive strike against a massive greenskin gathering that called itself a Great Crusade, destroying the Xenos leadership before they could fully organize their forces and preventing a potential threat to multiple Imperial sectors. These accomplishments earned Valoris a place among the Companions, the elite cadre that serves as the personal bodyguard of the Captain General and holds special responsibilities within the Custodian hierarchy. However, his tenure among the Companions lasted only 22 years before his aggressive nature and his desire for more proactive defense strategies led to his reassignment. This was not a demotion or disgrace, but rather a recognition that Valoris was temperamentally unsuited to the patient, reactive posture that the Companions maintained. He chafed at waiting for enemies to reveal themselves, preferring to seek them out and destroy them before they could threaten the Emperor or the Imperium. When the position of Captain General became vacant, Valoris was chosen to fill it, ascending to leadership of the entire Adeptus Custodes. His selection represented a shift in Custodian philosophy, a recognition that the changing circumstances of the Imperium in the 41st millennium required more active leadership and a willingness to deploy the Golden Warriors beyond Terra's walls when the stakes justified such deployment. The traditional Custodian conservatism, the preference for remaining within the Imperial Palace as motionless guards, could not adequately address the escalating threats facing humanity. Valoris's tenure as Captain General has been marked by his willingness to engage with the wider Imperium and to deploy Custodian forces when he judges such action necessary. When he took his seat among the High Lords of Terra, a position that the Captain General traditionally only assumes during the most dire circumstances, it signaled his intention to play an active role in Imperial governance, rather than simply guarding the Emperor in isolation. His presence among the High Lords has sometimes been contentious. Custodians do not simply defer to other Imperial authorities when they believe those authorities are making decisions that conflict with the Emperor's interests. But Valoris's voice carries weight that few can ignore, and his strategic insight has influenced critical Imperial decisions. During Robut Guilliman's return and the subsequent Second Battle of Terra, Valoris served as the overall commander of Imperial forces, defending the Imperial Palace against a massive Khornate incursion. He personally led a charge of 4,000 Custodians from the Lion's Gate, the largest deployment of Custodian forces in millennia, throwing back demonic hordes that had breached Terra's defenses and threatened to overwhelm the palace itself. When Guilliman arrived from Luna with reinforcements, Valoris cooperated fully with the returned Primarch, recognizing that the crisis required unified leadership and setting aside the pride or territoriality that might have complicated their interactions. Valoris wields the Watcher's Axe, the mastercrafted weapon that has been borne by every Captain General since Valdor's disappearance. This huge polearm crackles with golden lightning and can bisect enemy war engines with single blows. Its haft incorporates a bolt weapon called the Eagle's Scream that fires adamantium-tipped penetrator rounds at devastating rates of fire. In Valoris's hands, this weapon has ended threats that would have required entire armies to address, the Captain General cutting through enemy forces with the efficiency expected of the leader of the 10,000. Beyond his immediate combat prowess, Valoris has demonstrated the strategic acumen and political skill necessary to lead the Custodians in the complex environment of the 41st Millennium. He understands that the Custodians cannot be everywhere, that their small numbers require careful consideration of where and when to deploy them. He has established protocols for when Custodian intervention is justified and when other Imperial forces should be allowed to handle threats without golden intervention. He has worked to restore and expand the Custodians' numbers, bringing in new candidates and overseeing their transformation to replace losses accumulated over millennia of service. Valoris has also worked to rebuild the partnership between the Custodians and the Sisters of Silence, that alliance that proved so effective during the Great Crusade and the War in the Webway. When Guilliman returned and issued the Dispensatus Anathema, officially reintegrating the Sisters into Imperial military structure, Valoris enthusiastically supported the measure. The talons of the Emperor, the combined forces of Custodians and Sisters working in concert, represent a level of anti-demonic and anti-psychic capability that the Imperium desperately needs in an age when chaos grows ever stronger and psychic threats multiply. Under Valoris's leadership, the Custodians have emerged from their 10,000-year isolation to once again take an active role in defending the Imperium. They still guard the Emperor, still maintain their vigil over the Golden Throne, but they have also deployed across the galaxy when the threats justify such deployment. They fight in critical battles where their presence can turn the tide, eliminate high-value targets that lesser forces cannot reach, and serve as the Emperor's will made manifest in a galaxy that desperately needs reminding that humanity's finest warriors still stand ready to fight. Valoris embodies this new era of Custodian activity, leading by example and demonstrating that the Golden Warriors are as deadly and effective in the 41st Millennium as they were during the Great Crusade 10,000 years past. To understand the true strength of the Custodians requires direct comparison to the Space Marines, those other transhuman warriors who serve as the Imperium's primary military force. Both are enhanced far beyond baseline human capability. Both wear powered armor and wield advanced weapons. Both serve the Emperor with unshakable loyalty. Yet despite these surface similarities, the differences between Custodians and Space Marines are profound, reflecting fundamentally different philosophies of creation, training, and deployment that result in warriors who, while both superhuman, operate at distinctly different levels of capability. The most fundamental difference lies in how they are created. A Space Marine undergoes a process of organ implantation, receiving 19 genetically engineered organs that transform an adolescent human into a transhuman warrior. This process, while dangerous and requiring extensive surgery and recovery time, can be completed within a few years. The gene seed used to create these organs derives from one of the Primarchs, meaning all Space Marines of a given chapter share essentially the same genetic enhancements, the same baseline capabilities with variations arising more from training and experience than fundamental biological differences. A Custodian, by contrast, is built from the cellular level up through a process that takes decades and is individually tailored to each candidate. Every cell in their body is rewritten according to genetic templates that exist nowhere else in the Imperium. This is not mass production, but individual craftwork, creating warriors who are unique even among their brothers. The result is enhancement that operates at a fundamentally deeper level than Space Marine augmentation, producing capabilities that consistently exceed those of even the finest Astartes. In direct physical comparisons, Custodians demonstrate clear superiority across all measurable parameters. They are taller than Space Marines, typically standing a full head or more above even the largest Astartes. They are stronger, able to overpower Space Marines in direct contests of strength with consistency. that removes any doubt about which warrior type is physically superior. They are faster, moving and reacting at speeds that allow them to blitz Space Marine formations and engage multiple Astartes opponents simultaneously. They are tougher, able to endure punishment that would put Space Marines out of action, and continuing to fight through injuries that would prove fatal to Astartes warriors. Their equipment follows the same pattern of superiority. Custodian armor is crafted from auramite rather than the ceramite used in Space Marine power armor, providing better protection while maintaining greater flexibility and mobility. Each suit is handcrafted specifically for the individual custodian who will wear it, fitted perfectly and incorporating technologies that exceed standard Space Marine plate. Custodian weapons are individually created masterworks rather than pattern-produced armaments, each one receiving attention and craftsmanship that would make them priceless relics if found in a Space Marine chapter's armory, but which is standard issue among the 10,000. The training and education differences further amplify the gap. A Space Marine receives extensive training in warfare, learning to be an effective soldier who can fulfill various battlefield roles. The emphasis is on creating a warrior who can function as part of a squad and chapter, who understands his place in a larger military structure and who can execute his assigned role with maximum effectiveness. This training is comprehensive within its scope, but focused primarily on military skills and the knowledge needed to function as a Space Marine. A custodian receives training and education that encompasses warfare but extends far beyond it. They master diplomacy, philosophy, art, history, and countless other disciplines, becoming not just warriors, but also scholars and counselors. They are trained to think independently, to make strategic decisions, to serve as the Emperor's representatives in situations that require more than simple application of force. Where a Space Marine is educated to be the finest soldier possible, a custodian is educated to be a complete individual who happens to also be a supreme warrior. Combat doctrine reveals another significant difference. Space Marines fight as squads, as companies, as chapters, their strength multiplied through coordinated tactics and mutual support. An individual Space Marine is formidable, but Space Marines reach their full potential when fighting as parts of a larger whole, brothers supporting each other and executing tactics that leverage their combined capabilities. This squad-based approach creates synergies that make Space Marine units more effective than the sum of their individual members' capabilities. Custodians, by contrast, are trained to be supreme individual combatants. While they can and do fight alongside their brothers, each custodian is essentially a self-sufficient warrior capable of operating alone if necessary. They don't rely on squad tactics to cover individual weaknesses because they have no exploitable weaknesses. When multiple custodians fight together, the result is individual excellence multiplied by numbers rather than synergy created through coordinated tactics. This makes custodians less cohesive as large formations, but devastatingly effective as small units or even individual warriors. The psychological and mental differences are equally significant. Space Marines undergo hypno-conditioning that instills loyalty and trains them to think of their chapter as family, their brothers as the most important relationships in their lives. This creates fierce bonds of brotherhood and unit cohesion that make Space Marine chapters incredibly resilient and motivated. However, this conditioning also creates a certain mental rigidity, a tendency to think within doctrinal frameworks and to rely on established tactics and strategies. Custodians are psychologically conditioned to absolute loyalty to the Emperor, but they are also educated to think for themselves within the framework of that loyalty. They question, analyze, and make independent decisions based on their understanding of the Emperor's will, rather than simply following doctrine. This creates warriors who are less predictable, more adaptable, and capable of succeeding in situations where rigid adherence to doctrine would lead to failure. It also means custodians sometimes come into conflict with other imperial authorities, when they believe those authorities are not serving the Emperor's best interests. In terms of combat effectiveness, numerous accounts provide clear evidence that Custodians consistently outperform Space Marines in direct engagements. Individual Custodians have killed multiple Space Marines in single combats, with accounts describing Golden Warriors dispatching Astartes opponents with relative ease. The comparison is not a Custodian can beat a Space Marine. It is a Custodian can beat multiple Space Marines and emerge essentially unscathed. The gulf in individual capability is that significant. Historical examples support this assessment. Constantin Valdor killed 30 elite Thousand Sons Blade masters without taking a wound. Shield Captain Vendatha killed multiple Word-Bearer veterans, including a chaplain and a captain, in rapid succession. Shield Captain Valerian has engaged and defeated enemy champions who were themselves supremely capable warriors. The pattern is consistent. When Custodians fight Space Marines, even veteran Astartes with centuries of experience, the Custodians emerge victorious with a frequency that suggests systematic superiority rather than case-by-case advantages. The often cited comparison is that a single Custodian equals approximately 10 Space Marines in combat effectiveness. While this ratio should not be taken as precisely accurate across all situations, it provides a rough sense of the capability gap. A Custodian can accomplish objectives that would require a Space Marine squad, can hold defensive positions that would require multiple Astartes to defend, can eliminate threats that would challenge entire Space Marine tactical squads. This is not hyperbole or propaganda. It is observable reality demonstrated across thousands of engagements spanning 10 millennia of Imperial history. However, this individual superiority comes with significant trade-offs. There are approximately 1 million Space Marines spread across roughly 1,000 chapters throughout the Imperium. There are 10,000 Custodians, all of whom are based on Terra or deployed on specific missions that the Captain General judges worthy of their attention. Space Marines can be deployed across the entire galaxy, establishing domains, recruiting new brothers to replace losses, and maintaining permanent presence in regions that require constant vigilance. Custodians cannot be everywhere, cannot replace losses quickly, and must carefully choose where and when to deploy their limited numbers. Space Marines are also more versatile as an organizational force. A Space Marine chapter includes not just warriors, but also support personnel, fleet assets, industrial capacity, and the ability to operate independently for extended periods far from Imperial supply lines. Custodians are warriors first and last, lacking the logistical and organizational infrastructure that would allow them to operate as a true military force, rather than an elite strike force or bodyguard formation. The tactical flexibility of Space Marines, with their various specialist units and ability to field combined arms forces, including vehicles, aircraft, and orbital assets, gives them capabilities in certain situations that Custodians lack. A Space Marine force can conduct extended campaigns, hold territory, pacify populations, and accomplish objectives that require more than simply killing enemies. Custodians excel at direct combat, at elimination of specific threats, at operations where supreme individual capability matters more than logistics or territorial control. In summary, Custodians are individually superior to Space Marines in essentially every measurable way. They are stronger, faster, tougher, smarter, better trained, better equipped, and more skilled. They can consistently defeat Space Marines in direct combat, can accomplish objectives that would require much larger Astartes forces, and represent the absolute pinnacle of what humanity can create when resources and time are essentially unlimited, and every candidate receives individual attention throughout a decades-long transformation process. But Space Marines, for all their relative inferiority to Custodians, are present across the galaxy in numbers that allow them to actually fight the Imperium's wars, to hold territory, to replace losses, and to serve as the primary military force protecting humanity across a million worlds. Both warrior types have their place in the Imperium's defense, but they serve fundamentally different purposes and excel in fundamentally different roles. Despite their formidable capabilities, the Custodians are not without limitations and vulnerabilities. Understanding these constraints is crucial to comprehending their overall strategic role and why, despite their individual superiority, they cannot simply be deployed everywhere to solve every problem facing the Imperium. Their limitations stem not from any failure in their creation or training, but from the fundamental nature of what they are and how they were intended to be used. The most obvious limitation is simply numbers. With approximately 10,000 warriors, the Custodians cannot be deployed in force across the galaxy the way Space Marines can. Even if every single Custodian was deployed simultaneously to different locations, they could only address 10,000 threats at once, and the galaxy contains far more than 10,000 places where humanity needs protection. This numerical limitation forces the Custodians to be extremely selective about where and when they deploy, saving their intervention for situations where their unique capabilities make a critical difference. The time required to replace losses compounds this numerical limitation. A Space Marine chapter that suffers significant casualties can rebuild relatively quickly, recruiting new aspirants and putting them through the transformation process within a few years. The Custodians must invest decades to create each new warrior, meaning that losses in battle cannot be quickly replaced. Every Custodian who falls represents not just the loss of a supreme warrior, but also the loss of decades of investment and centuries of accumulated experience that can never be fully recovered. This makes the Custodians understandably cautious about committing to engagements where heavy casualties are likely even if victory could be achieved. The Custodians' individualistic combat doctrine, while a strength in many situations, can also be a limitation. They do not naturally operate as part of larger combined arms forces the way Space Marines do. They are less skilled at coordinating with non-Custodian units, less experienced at managing logistics for extended campaigns, and less practiced at the kind of sustained territorial warfare that characterizes many Imperial military operations. While they can certainly work with other Imperial forces when necessary, they are at their best when operating independently or in small groups rather than as parts of larger military formations. Their elite status and their direct connection to the Emperor can create political and social complications. Other Imperial authorities sometimes resent Custodian intervention, viewing it as implicit criticism of their own efforts or as the Emperor's lack of confidence in their abilities. Custodians, for their part, do not always defer to other Imperial hierarchies when they believe those hierarchies are making decisions that conflict with the Emperor's interests. This can create tension and even conflict with other Imperial organizations, though few are willing to openly challenge the authority of the Emperor's personal guardians. The Custodians' focus on protecting the Emperor and the Golden Throne creates constraints on their deployment. A significant portion of the 10,000 must always remain on Terra, maintaining the vigil over the Emperor and guarding the Imperial Palace against threats both external and internal. This means that even the limited numbers of Custodians are further reduced when it comes to how many can be deployed elsewhere. The Captain General must always balance the needs of the wider Imperium against the fundamental duty to protect the Emperor, and that balance tilts heavily toward maintaining sufficient presence on Terra. Despite their supreme individual capability, Custodians are not invincible. Sufficient firepower can overwhelm even their enhanced physiology and superior armor. Enemies who can bring truly massive force to bear, who can attack with weapons powerful enough to kill even these golden warriors, can and have defeated Custodians throughout their history. Greater demons, traitor primarchs, powerful enemy psychers wielding apocalyptic powers, all of these represent genuine threats that can kill even Custodians if the circumstances align against the Golden Warriors. The war in the Webway demonstrated that Custodians, for all their might, can be ground down through attrition if forced to fight endless waves of enemies without rest or reinforcement. While it took years of continuous combat against literally infinite demonic hordes to bring the Custodians to the brink of destruction, the fact remains that they were brought to that brink. They are not infinite in endurance or resilience. Given extreme enough conditions, even Custodians reach their limits. Their resistance to chaos corruption, while substantial, is not absolute immunity. Powerful enough demonic influence can affect even Custodians. Extremely potent psychic attacks can harm them. While they are far more resistant than other warriors, including Space Marines, they are not completely invulnerable to the threats posed by the warp and its denizens. They must still exercise caution when fighting demons, still maintain vigilance against corruption, still recognize that chaos represents a danger even to them. The specialized nature of their training and equipment means that Custodians are not optimized for certain types of operations. They are supreme warriors, exceptional in direct combat and elite operations. But they are not administrators, not engineers, not diplomats, despite their education in these fields, making them more capable than most in such roles. They cannot replace the vast imperial bureaucracy, cannot manage the logistics of feeding and supplying a galaxy-spanning empire, cannot fulfill the countless non-combat roles that are necessary to keep the Imperium functioning. Their lack of fleet assets compared to Space Marine chapters limits their strategic mobility, while Custodians can requisition transport when needed and possess some ships of their own. They do not maintain the extensive fleets that allow Space Marine chapters to project power across the galaxy independently. This makes them dependent on other Imperial organizations for transportation when they need to deploy far from Terra, creating logistical constraints that Space Marines do not face to the same degree. The psychological burden of their service, particularly their longevity and the accumulated weight of 10,000 years of duty, takes a toll that is difficult to measure, but very real. Custodians who have served for millennia have witnessed the slow degradation of the Imperium, have seen the Emperor's dream corrupted and diminished, have lost countless brothers to battles that, in the long view, seem to have accomplished little, while their enhanced minds and psychological conditioning allow them to continue functioning despite this burden. They are not immune to the spiritual exhaustion that comes from witnessing millennia of decline and holding faith in a purpose that sometimes seems futile. Despite these limitations and vulnerabilities, the Custodians remain humanity's finest warriors and most reliable defenders. Their constraints do not diminish their capabilities, but rather define the boundaries within which those capabilities can be effectively employed. Understanding these limitations is essential to deploying Custodians appropriately, to ensuring that when they are committed to action, it is in situations where their unique strengths can make a decisive difference, and where the costs of their engagement are justified by the critical nature of the objectives. The role of the Custodians in the Imperium of the 41st Millennium represents a careful balance between their original purpose as the Emperor's personal guards and the desperate needs of an Imperium beset by enemies on all sides. 10,000 years ago, at the height of the Great Crusade, the Custodians served primarily as the Emperor's companions and bodyguards, occasionally deploying for critical missions, but generally remaining at his side. The Horus Heresy, and particularly the War in the Webway, changed this, forcing the Custodians into extended combat roles that tested them to their limits and left them depleted in numbers and spirit. The Edict of Restraint that followed the heresy formalized what was already becoming inevitable. The Custodians would remain on Terra, would focus on guarding the Emperor now entombed upon the Golden Throne, and would only rarely venture beyond the walls of the Imperial Palace. For nearly 10 millennia, this was the pattern. The Custodians maintained their vigil, trained constantly, and prepared for threats that might breach Terra's defenses, but they rarely, if ever, deployed to fight in the wider galaxy. They became almost mythical figures, golden warriors glimpsed only by the most privileged Imperial servants, and known to the broader Imperium only through legend and rumor. This isolation was not sustainable indefinitely. As the 41st millennium progressed and the threats facing humanity multiplied and intensified, The question arose whether the Custodians could continue to remain passive guards while the Imperium crumbled around them. The return of Rabute Guilliman and the leadership of Trajan Valoris as Captain General marked a turning point, a recognition that circumstances had changed enough to warrant a shift in Custodian deployment doctrine. The modern Custodians still guard the Emperor. That remains their primary, non-negotiable duty. A significant portion of the 10,000 remains on Terra at all times, maintaining the vigil over the Golden Throne and protecting the Imperial Palace. But now, when the Captain General judges a threat significant enough to warrant Custodian intervention, Golden Warriors deploy beyond Terra to eliminate those threats before they can grow into existential dangers. This more active posture represents a return to something closer to their role during the Great Crusade, while still acknowledging the fundamental importance of guarding the Emperor. Custodian deployments in the current era focus on high-value targets and critical situations where their supreme individual capability can make a decisive difference. They conduct precision strikes against enemy leadership, eliminating threats that lesser forces cannot reach. They respond to demonic incursions where their resistance to chaos corruption makes them ideal for operations in environments where Space Marines would be at risk of corruption. They serve as the Emperor's direct representatives in situations requiring absolute authority and unquestionable loyalty. They hunt down artifacts and threats connected to the Emperor's enemies, ensuring that such dangerous items do not fall into the wrong hands. This expanded role has brought the Custodians into more frequent contact with other Imperial organizations, creating both opportunities and challenges. Space Marine chapters sometimes find themselves fighting alongside Golden Warriors, learning firsthand just how superior Custodians are in direct combat, while also recognizing the benefits of having such powerful allies. The Inquisition occasionally requests Custodian assistance with threats that exceed even the Inquisition's considerable capabilities, though the Custodians remain very selective about which such requests they honor. Imperial Guard commanders who witness Custodians in battle gain renewed faith in humanity's ability to stand against the darkness, seeing living proof that the Emperor's finest warriors still fight for the Imperium. The Custodians also serve a symbolic role that extends beyond their combat capabilities. They are living reminders of the Imperium's founding, of the Emperor's direct involvement in creating humanity's defenders, of standards and ideals that the current Imperium often fails to meet. When Custodians appear on a battlefield or in an Imperial institution, they bring with them the weight of 10,000 years of history and an expectation of excellence that can inspire other Imperial servants to exceed their usual performance. Their very presence can turn the tide not just through their combat prowess, but also through the effect they have on allies and enemies alike. Looking toward the future, the Custodians face challenges that will test whether their adaptations and expanded role can succeed in an Imperium that grows darker with each passing year. The 13th Black Crusade and the opening of the Great Rift have fundamentally changed the strategic situation, splitting the Imperium in two and creating conditions where demonic incursions and chaos corruption have become far more common. The Custodians, with their resistance to chaos and their supreme combat capabilities, are more valuable than ever, but they are also more desperately needed in more places than their limited numbers can address. The question of sustainability remains unresolved. Can the Custodians continue to slowly replenish their numbers through new candidates while also deploying actively across the galaxy? Will the losses they suffer in these expanded operations exceed their ability to replace them, leading to a gradual decline in the 10,000 strength? How many Custodians can safely be deployed away from Terra without leaving the Imperial Palace dangerously underdefended? These are questions that Trajan Valoris and future Captain Generals will have to answer through careful judgment and constant evaluation of changing circumstances. What is certain is that the Custodians remain humanity's finest warriors, the Emperor's direct legacy made manifest in gold and auramite. Their strength is not just physical or martial, but also spiritual and symbolic. They represent the ideal of what humanity can achieve, the standard against which all other warriors are measured. As long as the Golden Warriors stand vigil over the Emperor and continue to fight in his name, there remains hope that humanity can endure the darkness that threatens to consume it. The Custodians are, quite simply, proof that the Emperor's vision was not entirely lost, that his finest creations endure, and that his will continues to be enacted in the galaxy despite his physical imprisonment upon the Golden Throne. As we reach the conclusion of our exploration into the strength of the Custodians, certain truths emerge with clarity. The Adeptus Custodes represent the absolute pinnacle of what humanity can achieve through genetic enhancement, extensive training, superior equipment, and unwavering dedication to purpose. They are not merely elite warriors, but living masterpieces, each one a unique creation that embodies the Emperor's vision of perfected humanity applied to the specific purpose of supreme martial capability combined with intellectual and spiritual excellence. Their physical strength exceeds that of Space Marines, significantly, allowing them to overpower even power-armored Astartes through simple application of superior might. Their speed and reaction times place them among the fastest beings in the galaxy, capable of moving and fighting at velocities that make them appear as golden blurs on the battlefield. Their endurance allows them to fight for weeks or years, under conditions that would kill lesser warriors multiple times over, maintaining effectiveness through exhaustion, injury, and circumstances that should break even enhanced beings. Their enhanced senses and cognitive abilities allow them to process battlefields with clarity that grants them enormous tactical advantages, seeing threats before they manifest and responding with optimal counters before enemies can complete their attacks. Their combat prowess, honed through centuries or millennia of constant training and actual warfare, represents mastery of martial arts that few beings in the galaxy can match. They wield weapons that are individually crafted masterworks, wear armor that provides protection far exceeding standard military equipment, and employ tactics refined over 10,000 years of defending the Emperor and the Imperium. They can fight alone or in groups, can adapt to any battlefield situation, and can engage any enemy type with techniques optimized for that specific threat. They are generalists without weaknesses, warriors who excel at everything rather than specialists who are supreme in one area but vulnerable in others. Their mental capabilities elevate them beyond simple warriors into complete individuals who can serve as counselors, diplomats, investigators, and strategic planners, in addition to their combat roles. Their enhanced intellect, perfect memory, and broad education make them valuable assets in situations that require more than simple application of force. Their psychological conditioning instills absolute loyalty while preserving independent thought, creating servants who understand their purpose and choose to fulfill it rather than blindly following orders without comprehension. Their resistance to chaos corruption, stemming from the spark of the Emperor's own power woven into their creation, makes them uniquely suited to fighting demonic threats that would corrupt or destroy other warriors. They can stand before greater demons without flinching, can resist psychic attacks that would reduce others to mindlessness, and can maintain their sense of purpose and identity even when exposed to the worst horrors the warp can manifest. This resistance is not absolute immunity, but it is substantial enough to make Custodians the Emperor's finest weapon against the specific threats posed by chaos. The accounts of their battles throughout Imperial history provide concrete evidence of their capabilities, from Constantine Valdor, killing 30 elite Thousand Sons, Blade Masters single-handedly, to the Custodians' stand during the war in the Webway against infinite demonic hordes, to their modern deployments under Trajan Valoris's leadership. The pattern is consistent. Custodians achieve victories that should be impossible, accomplish objectives that would require far larger forces of lesser warriors, and emerge from battles that would destroy entire Space Marine chapters. They are living proof that quality can overwhelm quantity when that quality is developed to absolute perfection, yet their limitations must also be acknowledged. They are few in number, cannot be everywhere, cannot replace losses quickly, and must carefully choose where their intervention will make the most difference. They are supremely effective warriors, but not administrators, not logisticians, not the answer to every problem facing the Imperium. They have a specific purpose: guard the Emperor and eliminate threats that lesser forces cannot handle. And while they excel at that purpose, they cannot be expected to solve problems that require different capabilities than those they possess. The question posed at the beginning, how strong are the Custodians, can now be answered with confidence. They are stronger than any other warriors humanity has created, surpassing even the already formidable Space Marines in every measurable category of capability. A single Custodian represents combat power roughly equivalent to 10 Space Marines or hundreds of elite baseline soldiers. They can fight for extended periods under conditions that would kill others, can resist threats both physical and spiritual that would destroy lesser beings, and can accomplish objectives that others would consider impossible. They are, quite simply, the finest warriors the Emperor ever created, the living embodiment of his vision for humanity's protectors, the golden standard against which all other warriors are measured and found wanting. But their true strength lies not just in these measurable capabilities, but in what they represent. They are proof that the Emperor's vision was achievable, that humanity can create beings of supreme excellence without sacrificing their essential humanity, that dedication to purpose and perfection of craft can produce results that defy easy comprehension. They are living links to the Imperium's founding, warriors who have served since before the Imperium existed, and who will continue to serve as long as the Emperor endures. They are symbols of hope in a dark galaxy, evidence that humanity's finest achievements have not been lost to the decay of 10,000 years of decline. As the Imperium faces its darkest hours in the 41st Millennium, with the Great Rift splitting the galaxy and enemies pressing in from all sides, the existence of the Custodians provides reassurance that humanity still possesses weapons capable of facing any threat. When golden warriors march to war, when the 10,000 deploy beyond Terra's walls, when the Emperor's own guardians take to the field, allies take heart, and enemies feel the first, cold touch of genuine fear. For the Custodians are not simply strong, they are the strongest warriors humanity has ever produced, the finest exemplars of martial excellence the galaxy has ever seen, and the living proof that the Emperor's dream, while damaged, endures in his most perfect creations. In the end, the strength of the Custodians is not just physical or martial, it is spiritual, symbolic, and strategic. They are strong enough to stand between humanity and extinction, skilled enough to fight enemies that would overwhelm entire armies, dedicated enough to maintain their vigil across 10,000 years of slow decline and growing darkness. They are, in every sense that matters, as strong as they need to be to fulfill their purpose. And that purpose, protecting the Emperor and the Imperium he built, is the most important mission that exists in the 41st Millennium. As long as the Golden Warriors stand watch, as long as the 10,000 endure, humanity retains its finest, defenders, and its greatest hope for survival in a galaxy that offers precious little of either. If you enjoyed learning about the Golden Warriors of the Emperor, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the fascinating lore of Warhammer 40,000. The Adeptus Custodes represent just one of the many incredible factions and forces that populate this rich universe, and there is always more to explore in the grim darkness of the far future.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.